Hello, and welcome to Off the Roll. I'm your host, Troy Hirschman. I'm actually in DeKalb, Illinois. We play the Northern Illinois Huskies tonight in men's basketball, so I got my day job rolling today. But today's podcast, we have Ron O'Neill. Ron is a 1969 alumni of Ball State University and started his athletic training career at Northwestern University. So it's kind of ironic that I'm in the Chicagoland area as we post this podcast. And then on to the Philadelphia Eagles, where he spent 11 years, started his NFL career, and then 18 with the New England Patriots. And we talk about all that in the podcast episode today, as well as his innovation and development of taping products for Andover coated products. It's a great podcast. He's got some great stories, and we look forward to hearing from him about his awesome career. So let's go off the roll with Ron O'Neill. Welcome to Off the Roll. I'm your host, Troy Hirschman. I'm here today with Ron O'Neill. Ron is an alumni of the Ball State Athletic Training Education Program, longtime athletic trainer in the NFL, and then most recently retired from Andover Coatings, for product coatings, makers of PowerTape and PowerFlex, and really innovated a lot of things with that product line that we'll probably hopefully get a chance to talk about a little bit. So welcome to Off the Roll, Ron.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Troy.
Oh, no, this is awesome. So kind of like what I explained to you before, we're going to get started by just telling your story, kind of how you got started in athlete training, maybe where you were from and how you ended up at Ball State. And then we'll just kind of go from there.
Sure. Yeah, my life's journey. I was born in Clarksburg, West Virginia, lived there for 15 years. And then when I was a junior in high school, my father took a job with Owens, Illinois, in Toledo, Ohio. So moved there. I finished high school in Toledo. And then as I was finishing my senior year in high school, my father was he was transferred down to Muncie, Indiana, at Owens, Illinois there, because he was a director, and he did product development and so forth. So off we went to Muncie. I didn't know where I was going to go to college. I played baseball in high school, had some offers in Ohio with some schools there, but he said, "Hey, come down here." And of course, he left before we moved. 6 or 8 months ahead. So he said, so we went down to visit Dad. He said, "Let's go over and tour Ball State." And he said, "I think you might like it." So I did that, and of course fell in love with it. And then of course we moved to Muncie, Indiana, and I became a Ball State student, and that's how that happened.
Yeah.
Then from there, so I started university, but my dream was to be an architect. I really loved that, drawing and math and so forth. And Ball State just started the architectural program, so I entered Ball State studying architecture, or planning to be an architect.
Yeah.
And then what happened, I was playing intramural basketball, and I sprained my ankle. And when I sprained my ankle, it was during February. I couldn't ambulate around campus, so I'd stay back then you had to stay at student house. So I was in there for a week. And then from the second floor, you went down to physical therapy. Well, Bud Miller and Dick Hoover were the physical therapists and ATCs.
Yeah.
So then, they were teachers, PTs at the health service in the morning, and in the afternoon they went over the ATs and PTs for all the sports programs.
Yeah.
So that's how that happened. So, 3 times a day I'd go down for physical therapy. So I got a chance to talk to Dick and Bud, and then by the end of the week, I was so impressed with, what was going on, seeing my pain relief, symptomatic results, and I said, "Wow, this physical therapy is pretty impressive."
Yeah.
So I was talking to Dick more than Bud at the time, but Dick said, I said, "I really like this." He said, "Well, why don't you come by? Why don't you come by in the spring and observe?" So I did that. Fell in love with it. Was impressed. I said, "This might be a great, profession."
Yeah.
So by the end of my observation period, Bud and Dick invited me to come back in the fall and observe more. And if I liked it, then I could become a student trainer. So that's how I changed my major to physical education with emphasis in biology and all the athletic training minor courses back then.
Yeah.
Before there was a major. And that's how my athletic training career started.
So real quickly, were you in any of Bud's classes at that time? So give me a time frame at first, what
65 to 69.
65 to 69. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I had Bud for I think first aid. I had Hoover for anatomy.
Okay.
And man, both of them were unbelievable educators, and both were brilliant. Bud was, Bud had a PhD, so he was ATC and PT, physical therapist, but he also had the PhD. But the amazing thing is, his PhD from Stanford was in English.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody knows that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's the first time I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm almost sure that Bud's PhD from Stanford was in English because he wrote the curriculum. He was doing that back in he started that back in the late 50s, early 60s. He was writing and thinking the curriculum. And then I had so Bud was tough. A tremendous educator, really, really hard. All those courses that those guys taught, especially they were hard on us being student trainers because the expectation was so high and great. And of course, Dick Hoover, in my lifetime, I put him up there with a tremendous speaker, brilliant man, and he developed the word entrepreneur. But in his early days, he was the consummate athletic trainer. Unbelievable, because he was one of Bud's student trainers, and then after he graduated, he went on to Ohio State and got his physical therapy, and then came back and joined the staff at Ball State.
So who was? I know Sendre talks about having to write on one blackboard. There were two blackboards in the classroom, and you had to write on one and get all the notes off of one, because if you weren't fast enough, you'd come back and erase the first one and start all over again. So that today would be that would be interesting if you taught a class like that today and saw how the kids would try to keep up. It would. Well, of course, now what they would do is they take a picture of it on their phone and then go back and look at it after that. So.
Oh yeah.
So who was kind of around? Who were you in classes with? Snowball had talked about in his podcast that there was a handful of athletic training students or student athletic trainers that were in the class, but it was only really the best of the best. A lot of them were PE majors and teaching majors and stuff. But who were kind of some of the student athletic trainers that were around when you were there?
During that era, where when you think about that, there were just a couple. They always had just a couple student trainers.
Yeah.
And then it grew as athletic training around the country was growing, and everybody was utilizing student trainers as athletics progressed, and you just needed more people because athletics became more involved. But we had there was one guy who was one of Bud's favorites. His name was I can't. It was, I think he was like a senior getting ready to graduate when I started observing and so forth. But he was Bud's guy. I think his last name was Sharp. And then
Okay.
he went on and did an internship with Philadelphia Eagles with Moose Daddy for a couple years. And then we had there's another guy, Stu Miller. Stu Miller was also a Ball State basketball player. He was a big old guy from, I think, around from Kokomo or something.
Yeah.
So he was a athletic trainer and also a basketball player. Like myself, I was an athletic trainer, and then I also played baseball at Ball State.
I was going to ask you a little bit about that. If you were playing, were you playing baseball kind of at the same time?
Well, what happened when I went to Ball State, at that time, when I first started college, I didn't play, and then my sophomore year, I walked on. After I observed, the people that were playing, I said, I can do this because that's, I wanted to pursue that. I had, offers in some of the schools in Ohio. And so I walked on. But before that, once I committed to being an athletic trainer, changed my major, I asked, Bud and Dick, said, I'd like to do this. I think I can play. So I walked on and they allowed me to do that. So, I had the fall and the winter as an AT, and then my late winter and spring, and then I played baseball.
Yeah. Who was your baseball coach then?
Ray Loudon.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yep.
Coach Loudon. Of course, he was the head football coach too, and probably one of the most successful coaches in Ball State history in two sports. But he was I've been around a lot of great coaches, but he's right at top of the class. There was nobody that could motivate like him. They called him Big Red.
Big Red.
He was amazing. Yeah. Scare you to death. Just could bring fear in your eyes. I mean, that's the command he had.
Yeah.
And of course, our baseball team, we're the winningest baseball team in Ball State history as far as our depth in the NCAA tournament.
Okay. So how far did you get?
One game from Omaha.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Out there on the wall, there's the 1969 Ball State thing out there in center field, right center.
Yeah.
So that was fun.
Yeah, I bet it was. So at one point, you kind of had to make a decision, like what's next, basically. I mean, so what were your options once you were done at Ball State, and what were you thinking?
Well, as I went through my years as undergraduate, my junior year, Bud left and took the head trainer job at the University of Washington. Okay. And it was like, wow. So then Hoover became, no, I take that back. I got the timing wrong. Okay. Hoover my junior year, Hoover left and became the head trainer at Northwestern University in the Big Ten in Chicago.
Right.
Okay, then the very next year, then Bud left and went to University of Washington. Okay, then that left. By then, Sendre joined the staff with Dickerson, because you had Bud, Hoover, and Dickerson, and then they brought on Sendre, and those guys became co-head trainers at that time.
Any, if you can remember, is there any Sendre Dickerson stories from back then when you were a student that you would want to tell? Could you tell? Could you remember to tell? I mean,
well, I loved them both, but
yeah.
Well, let me proceed, and then I'll be
you can come back to that. The one thing that's kind of been a central theme through this group, with Bradley and Snowball and even Ron a little bit, there's always been some kind of babysitting story with Dickerson. In fact, I talked to Carol. I saw Carol Friday night at a little restaurant. Yeah, just west of here.
Yes.
Yeah, and I said, Carol, there's always these guys keep talking about the time they had at Coddington. Coddington tells a story about when he got to babysit the girls or something. There's a central theme about babysitting for the Dickersons with all you guys as students. So
I did that a couple times. Yes.
Yeah.
I forgot all about that.
Yeah, and Jim's famous joke that somebody asked him if he could kiss the girls goodnight, and he said, "Oh, you stay the hell away from them." So,
oh yes.
Probably Snowball,
Yeah. Yeah, they were sweethearts, good kids.
Yeah.
So anyway,
yeah.
So those guys left. So it was interesting as I graduated. Then I applied for during that time, like 1968 or so. That's when curriculums sprung up.
Uh-huh.
And then there was one master's program at University of Arizona, and that was directed by Gary Delforge. And then you had some undergraduate curriculums. You had one at one of the first ones was Ohio University with Al Green. Then you had one at Westchester with Phil Donnelly in Pennsylvania. And then you had it was like 4 or 5, but there was one master's program. So I was all set. I applied and got accepted, and I was going to go down there and start my master's at University of Arizona in August. Well, what happened? I was still playing semi-pro baseball in the summer because when I switched my majors, I had to pick up some other classes, and then plus being hurt way back then, I had to drop a couple classes because I just missed so much time. So then I had to go to summer school in the summer of '69. As I was doing that, there in July, Dick Hoover's assistant, Tom Oxley, assistant at Northwestern University, Tom Oxley left and became the head trainer at Long Beach State. So there Dick was. He didn't have an assistant, and so he called Dickerson and Sendre and said, "Hey," and of course I had a great relationship with Dick, and he said, "What's O'Neill doing?" And said, "Well, he's planning on going to University of Arizona to do his master's." He said, "Well, I'd like to talk to him. Have him give me a call." So my guy just left, and I think I'd like to hire him. So Sendre called me right away and said, "Hey, call Hoove. He wants to talk to you about his assistant job." So I did, and he said, "Well, come up for an interview, and then you can make up your mind." So I did that, and of course, I took the position, and the rest is kind of history as far as my career. But that's how my career got started with Dick.
Yeah. Was Dick pretty persuasive in trying to get you to abandon the master's idea, or did you have to think about it a little bit?
Actually, I didn't have to think too much because it's just a tremendous opportunity. The thing about athletic training back then, Troy, was the Midwest was kind of the hub of athletic training. You had, Pinky Newell was our executive director at Purdue, and then of course he and Bud were roommates.
Yeah.
Okay, and they were really, really tight. So what Pinky was doing, and then you had Lindsey McLean who ran the membership and of course the curriculum way back then. As a part of it. And then of course Bud wrote the curriculum. He was the director of that. And then you had all the people in the Big Ten was the big powerhouse of athletics.
Right.
And of course Chicago was the powerhouse of athletic manufacturing and all the businesses.
Okay.
To be at Northwestern, it was just the perfect spot. And all the Big Ten people, as far as the NATA, were on the board of directors. Everybody was a player in the progression of our profession.
Yeah.
So it was a no-brainer.
Yeah. Wow.
And of course, working with Dick, because Dick at that time, he was an entrepreneur and he was a man on the move in Chicago. Wheeler and dealer boy.
Yeah.
He was brilliant. He was brilliant. He had so many things, irons in the fire. It was amazing. And he did until the day he died.
Yeah. 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 That's the thing. I kind of that was what the idea was to get this podcast going was, Glenn had told a story one day we were at lunch when he was visiting JD in the hospital. He went to lunch with Neil and I, and he tells this story, which I'm going to get on the podcast, but he tells this story when they were opening clinics. He was in New Mexico and he and Glenn there needed some artwork for a clinic. And so they ran into this Indian chief and his daughter on the side of the road. And he bought all this artwork for the clinic, and to seal the deal, they had to smoke the peace pipe with peyote. And Glenn tells the story that he had to drive back because I wasn't fit to drive back either. But yeah, so yeah, wheeling and dealing, I think is a great. We're going to have a podcast on that with Glenn about all the Hoove stories of wheeling and dealing. Yeah.
Oh boy, I mean, they're endless. I mean, we all could tell stories on Hoove, boy. Oh my goodness. Every day working with Dick. So I was with him 69 through through 72.
Yeah.
And then he left Northwestern and to become the educational director at Kramer.
Yeah.
And he did that for a year, and that bored him out. And then he came back to Chicago, and that's where he started his PT clinics, and then he turned that into a mega $1 million operation. Yeah.
I actually have a picture. I think I've sent it to you where I found in some of Sendry's old first aiders of a workshop that you guys had up at Northwestern. You're in it, Sendry's in it, and Dick is in it, and
right.
a group of student athlete trainers at Northwestern with that, and yeah, I mean that's again, I think that's so interesting that that you had a eyewitness view of all this stuff that as it got started. With outpatient PT clinics and innovations that Dick was doing at Northwestern, and then
right.
kind of all that stuff as it started growing, you had a whole eyewitness view of all that. So
yes.
So what sports did you work at Northwestern while you were there? I just asked you what sports, what teams you're working with at Northwestern.
What I did there, see, back in the day, most places only had head trainer and one assistant
Yeah.
athletic trainer. And then if you're fortunate enough, you would have the students. At Northwestern, they had a very small physical education program, and there's not too many people, and they had no curriculum or anything like that. So what we did with student trainers would be the work study. So
Okay. Yeah.
working with some people on campus, then he would get people that were pre-med students, and then turn them into student trainers for them to pick up some extra money.
Yeah.
But the sports I did, of course, obviously we did football.
Right.
And then, back then we just had, football, basketball, track, and cross country, and baseball.
Yeah.
We didn't have any other sports, and we didn't have any female sports.
Exactly. Yeah.
That didn't come about yet. So then I did basketball,
Okay.
and then of course, then I did baseball, and then of course we both did spring football together, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing we've talked about too, is that there were no, at that point in time, like with Jay and Glenn and stuff too, that there were no women's sports at that time. So
right.
What you were doing was there, you were mostly helping out with men's sports and stuff like that. And you just didn't have those opportunities. There might be, what Glenn explained was that, like, there might be, if you were at the health center, you might see a club athlete or something in a women's sport with that. But yeah, it was very rare to do that. So, so after Northwestern, what was your next opportunity?
So I worked, Northwestern there for 4.5 years. Once Dick left and became the director there with Kramer, then being young and so forth, what happened is Northwestern, Tom Oxley was very close to the head football coach, Alex Agassi. And once Dick left, of course, Tom had only worked at Northwestern all of his life as an assistant, a long time assistant.
Yeah.
So, so he inquired, and they brought him back as the head trainer. And I worked with him for one football season.
Okay.
And then Otho Davis went from the Baltimore Colts to Philadelphia to be the head athletic trainer. And at the time, Otho then was the executive director of the NATA.
Yeah.
He followed Pinky Newell and the guy after Pinky, the guy was the head trainer for the St. Louis Cardinals. And then so Otho was looking for an assistant. The thing about Otho, so from 1973, things started clicking as far as technology and progression and all the inventions in physical therapy and athletic training, strength and conditioning and all that. The thing that we had at Northwestern, see, we were also the head and assistant athletic trainers for the college all-star game.
Right.
Okay. So what we did, and that went on for, probably that started way back in the 30s or 40s, whenever. But the college all-stars, which were all your first round draft choices in the NFL and some of the second rounds, they would make up the team of the best, and they would come and spend the whole month of July training to play the world champion NFL team. That's how the NFL season started. Was with
wow.
The college all-star. Yeah, and that was at Chicago Bears,
right.
their arena. So that was all the people that we got exposed to and met. It was probably one of the most prestigious events in all sports during the calendar year. But, I had Terry Bradshaw and all those, Franco Harris and all those greats.
Right. Wow.
We had Chris Collinsworth, Cincinnati Bengals, now the analyst.
Yeah.
Had him, all those greats.
Yeah.
And all those guys through the 70s, really built the NFL to what it is today. So that was a great opportunity. But because we were the athletic trainers, and Chicago being the hub of all that innovative progression with modalities and everything and exercise equipment, there was this one company called IsoNet, and they brought in all their machines for our rehab.
Okay.
So it's called isokinetic, isotonic. Okay. And then I learned, but it wasn't electromechanical like Cybex or what's the one now took over for Cybex. What's your isokinetic?
The Norm. That's the only thing I can think of. Those guys are up in your area or New York. They're in New York. Yeah.
Yeah.
Humac.
Yeah. You have that one, and but
Biodex is the other one.
Biodex.
Yeah.
So Cybex was the first one on the block, but because we had the isokinetic, or isonetic, which was a hydraulic, it wasn't electrical, but it still had the same concept. So I did a master's. Did a couple master's courses, and I did a research project using isotonic, isometric, and isokinetic. And because I had that background with isokinetic, see, when Otho became the head trainer at the Eagles, then one of the deals was he had an unlimited budget. So he was going to do Cybex and do the whole room with Cybex equipment, but he needed somebody that knew something about isokinetic. So he and Dick Hoover were best of friends, and he knew Dick was innovative and all that. So the word on the streets, Otho was looking for, to hire an assistant, and they told him that O'Neill, Ron O'Neill has background in isokinetic. So I got an interview, and of course I got the job.
Yeah.
Because of that, I had a niche that other people didn't have. So it was a big break and an opportunity for me because of that background.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, being in the right place at the right time, huh?
Correct. And, Ball State, the reputation, because Otho was a head trainer at Kent State before he left and went to Duke. And then he left there and went to the Baltimore Colts. So all those guys they all grew up together, same age and so forth.
Yeah.
So right place at the right time, correct.
Yeah. So how long were you with the Eagles?
I was with the Eagles for 11 years. So I was 73 to 84. And of course, the opportunity there with Otho being executive director and the Eagles, our owner, he had an unlimited, but he didn't even have a budget. He'd buy whatever he wanted. So our facility was at the time one of the larger in the country.
Yeah.
And we had every state-of-the-art equipment that money could buy. If it was new, we got it.
Wow.
So to have all the resources at your beck and call and right at your fingertips was really something, because working with Otho, I mean, every day was an event. Every day was exciting. So, 11 years, and, we threw in some great success there with Dick Vermeil.
Yeah.
Had a Super Bowl, a lot of playoff years. And then the New England Patriots, their longtime trainer, left, and the general managers of the New England Patriots and the Philadelphia Eagles were really, really close. and the owners were too. So we were having all that success, and because of the facility we had and the things we were doing, our deal developed a reputation. So they called and asked if I could interview, because New England at the time was very antiquated, very behind the times.
Right.
They really didn't have much there. So they wanted to duplicate what the Philadelphia Eagles were doing because of the reputation that it had established. So I got the interview, and they gave me an unlimited budget, and I took the position. It was an offer I couldn't refuse.
I want to go back before you get started on that. I want to go back and revisit a little bit in your time with the Eagles. I think one of the things that was really that was really cool, probably through your time and then beyond a little bit, because Otho obviously valued education and educating young athletic trainers. But the student intern program that was there when you were there and then beyond, has developed some pretty outstanding athletic trainers. Not me. I was just lucky to be around. But I mean, can you remember some of those kids that went through that program when you were there?
Oh my goodness. See, the way it started, that was one of the deals that for Otho to take the job was to have a summer intern and a seasonal assistant.
Yeah.
So we always had a 6-month assistant, and then for training camp, it started out that he would have 5 student trainers, and then and these student trainers were selected from all of his friends around the country. We had people from all over, so that grew from 5 to 6 to 8 to 10. And then, of course, I had left in '84, and then I think at one time he had 20. And then, oh yeah, it was crazy. And then he also probably had 4 or 5 seasonal interns.
Yeah.
But through all my years, and then I did the same program at New England, and I started out with a seasonal intern, 6-month assistant. And then I started out with 6. And then by the time I ended in 2002, I had 6 during the season. And then we had, 10 students during the summer. So, but then I started traveling with Andover with, the educational program and the taping. And so I got to go to all these universities where all these former student trainers, were. And it's amazing because typically when we'd hire these people, we'd call Neil, say, Neil, you have any great one? Another friend, do you have a great one? Do you around the country? Or if somebody had a great student, then they would call and say, hey, I really have a great one. And they didn't call if he didn't have a great one, because typically the people that O hired and I hired were the best of the best. So there's so many great ones. I mean, between Philly and New England, I think I had 400 interns.
That's a huge legacy. And I don't think, I mean, that's a credit to you and especially Otho, but but you too. I mean, you influenced. That's the one thing that here it is almost 30 years, and I still stay in contact with the majority of interns that I went through with in 91. And we were from all over the country. Like you said, we were from all over the country. And and we still talk about stuff. I mean, especially when the Eagles were in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, we're going back and forth and posting pictures on that Facebook website and stuff. And like, just enjoying the time together. But even though we may have moved on to different things in our own lives, maybe not involved with athletic training, but or I'll get a text every now and then or something. I get hit up like, "Hey, I saw you on TV tonight. You look great," or
Right.
"You look like a bum," or whatever. We still have fun with each other because of that.
Sure.
And that had that experience not been available, there's no way that we could have kept in contact, or we wouldn't have had the chance to meet somebody from California. My roommate was from California. I had guys that were from Virginia and Boston, and then of course, was Chuck Demirs around when you were there? Was he still helping out?
He brought him in later.
Yeah. I mean, Chuck's stories were just amazing too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, from where
legendary.
Yeah,
Great
yeah.
guy.
I mean, yeah. I think about that, like the opportunity to interact with somebody like that wouldn't have been available either. And so it really is pretty cool that you guys developed that and stuff. So again, as you get to New England, you're trying to set this up a little bit. Who do you bring as your assistant into New England?
The first guy I brought was Randy Dugas.
Okay.
Randy Dugas was from Lamar University in Texas, and he was a student trainer the year before I with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Okay.
So he graduated. He was a little bit older, and because typically most of these people were juniors going to be seniors, and then we would pick the best of the class to come back the next year as a 6-month assistant if they chose to. So he was really great. And once I got the New England job, then I called him and asked him if he'd be interested in becoming my 6-month, and he says, "Oh, absolutely." So the thing great about it with Randy was he knew the Eagle system, so he knew exactly everything that I wanted to do, just like we did with the Eagles. So that made my first year really, really easy because Jim Plemer was the assistant trainer with New England, and I chose to retain him, which is, one of my smartest moves because he's a brilliant guy. He's now the head. He's been a long time head athletic trainer at UCal Irvine.
Okay.
So he was an ATC PT, and he's from Appleton, Wisconsin. He's a cheesehead, but really, really smart. He was young.
Yeah.
So, I kind of mentored him along into the philosophy of what we did in Philadelphia, and then that whole progression, because, I brought in the isokinetic, I brought in all the modalities, all the state-of-the-art stuff that they didn't have. So it was a great learning thing for him as well. And then I just talked to Randy Dugas last week.
Wow.
We've always stayed in touch, like you said, and he still has friends up here, and when he comes to visit, he'll drop in for a few hours, and so there's so many people like that. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go back to Philadelphia just one last time, but you talked about the room a little bit, how big it was, and the space that you had comparative to what a lot of teams had at that time. But
Right.
my memories of that room was like it was like a museum, and you had to be around when Otho was bringing that stuff in. I mean, were you like, what in the world is going on here?
Well, see, when I got there, again, Moose Daddy, who's a longtime trainer there, was ATC PT. He's really a brilliant man.
Yeah.
Once he retired, And then he developed the pro knee sleeves and all the knee.
Right. Yeah.
And then turned that into $1 million, mega $1 million production. But anyway, so we started with that. And see, Otho was, he was a collector. He was like a rat pack, you know?
Yeah.
But something that we did, at the time, you didn't have that many people living in the area in the off season. You didn't have safe conditions and all that. But the barn board came from, we had the off season basketball program, and we went way up in northern Pennsylvania, and the community, you know, they have dinner, and we stayed all night at somebody's resort and so forth, and then drove back the next day. But during that time, he saw this barn, and he talked to the guy that owned it. And he goes, "What are you going to do with that old barn, all the barn wood?" So he said, "Man, it's just going to probably rot." And he said, "Can I have it?" So they put all that barn board, and because they loved Otho, put it in their truck and brought it down to Vet Stadium.
Oh, wow.
And then he had all the Vet Stadium grounds crew, the carpenters and everything that maintained the city recreation. They would come in after work and do all the
oh my goodness,
all the barn board and decorating. Yeah. But and then you take, you know, remember going down the center, you had all those helmets.
Yeah.
And it was like a museum. Those helmets went back to early 1900s. If you remember the fold-up helmets and the leather helmets.
I mean, I had seen some pictures, you know, from other interns that had from Ball State had been there before I left, and but I didn't realize all the stuff that was in there until I walked in.
Antiques on the wall.
Yeah.
All those antiques that he got from Texas, you know, down home.
I don't know if you can see behind me. I'm going to tilt this a little bit. I know you can't. This is not great for a podcast, but you can see a little bit. I'm pointing at it. I actually have a barber's chair in my basement, and a little bit of that. Otho was a little bit of that inspiration, because those guys would go sit in it. He would sit in it and take a nap. We'd have players that would go in there and sit in that thing and lean that thing back and take a nap in it. That was like the hit thing, was the barber's chair. Yeah. And then the slot machine, I don't know if that was there when you were there, but gosh, I probably dumped $100 of per diem money in that stupid slot machine. And then one day, like our rookie offensive lineman, hang on a minute. That the first round draft pick walks in there one day, drops a quarter in there, pulls the lever. After all of us interns had been in there, you know, putting money in this thing for like 2 weeks straight, he comes in and hits the thing and it just empties out in front of him. And I mean, we were all looking at each other like, this is the $1 million baby right here. And we've been putting money in this. We're getting $90 a week. And this guy just walks out with all of our money. So, and was just laughing. He thought it was the most, he goes, "Well, boys, you can start filling it up again." But
then you remember you had all those fish tanks and everything.
Oh yeah.
And then, hey, when you went there, had he built the dormer back behind the office and in the kitchen and everything? Yeah. He expanded that after I left because we had that initially, and the 6 month people would live there.
And I'd heard those stories too about the year I got there, we didn't get a chance to stay there because the fire marshal had come through and found the room, you know, the sleeping room, and said no more, because there's only one way in, one way out, and if there was a fire in here, you guys would all die. And I didn't get that experience. I had to go stay at a Hilton somewhere in New Jersey. So I guess, you know, I missed out on that experience, but I mean, I got to stay in a nicer place and
Yeah, you didn't miss out. You didn't miss anything, trust me. I mean,
but
sleep down there with the stadium rats, man.
oh yeah, that's what they talked about. Is every now and then you would hear something moving around in there, and
Oh yeah,
it was there.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So you're in New England. You're kind of you're. How long are you in New England for?
20 years.
20 years. Okay.
Yeah. So from 84 until 2002. Very fortunate. Had 3 more Super Bowls and 1 World Championship.
Yeah. That was a great run. In that aspect, one of the things that I want to ask about, because I think that I think that people, some of the audience would know this, some of the audience would not, but in talking with your interns, that I knew from Ball State and stuff, one of the things they always talked about was your innovation and your creativity to keep people on the field. And I saw some of that when you would come visit Ball State.
Yeah.
In particular, one crazy ankle brace that kept Joey Lynch to keep him playing. I mean, he would not have played otherwise if had it not been for that ankle brace. But talk to me a little bit about, is that something that came from, your desire to be an architect, and so you had enough creativity to say, I'm going to translate this into something else as in what I'm doing now.
It's funny you say that, because that's where it all came from, the design. And I was just very fortunate to be around people that were innovative and stimulating, and both Dick and Otho would allow me to they were innovative too with what the resources they had, but then when resources grew even more with technology and raw materials, then that's when athletic training and prevention post-acute care really took off. But before I left Philadelphia, one of the things that happened with me that got me started with doing all these braces and various innovative things to help people play and not get re-injured, like the ankle brace. But we had an offensive guard in Philadelphia, Wade Key from Texas, good old boy. He had one year left to play, and he was going to retire, but he was good, and we were starting to win. He wanted to be part of it. When training camp, he had a grade 3 ankle, and he ruptured, his whole lateral complex. So he said, we casted him up and all that, and Otho says, you're going to play this year. And you think back then we didn't have braces, it didn't exist. So as I was rehabbing and treating this guy and bringing him back, and Doc said, if you can stabilize it, he can play. It's not going to hurt anything. Then we can fix it later if it doesn't scar in. So I was doing a lot of running back then, and I thought, okay. And he had an interesting foot type, and I thought, okay, if we can take, so we did have orthoplast. So I took orthoplast and ran it underneath, but I thought, okay, and he had a pace cavus type of foot. So he was already inverted, it was a high arch and all that, very susceptible. And I thought, okay, if we can take an orthotic and then put an orthosis attached to it, keep him in neutral, and then run up the sides, and so he doesn't roll his ankle. So just with that, I kept doing Otho's, what the hell are you doing? I said, it's still work. So there was a podiatrist that we got to make the the orthotic.
Right.
And then the podiatrist knew of a brace guy, and he said, who was just young and innovative.
Yeah.
With polypropylene, polyurethane, and all that. So we talked with him, and I told him this is what we like to do. So the first inversion ankle brace came into being, and that's where it all started. And then when I went to New England, I found some people up here that were unbelievable. And for 20 years, they did all the ankle, I did the toe, the wrist, the shoulder, you name it, my knee, hamstring stuff, my thumb, TFCC bracing, elbow. So it was a lot of fun. But, like one time we had our first round draft choice, Irving Fryer from Nebraska. He came in, he was the first pick in the draft, and first week in training camp, he dislocated his shoulder. And he goes, we were really getting good then. And he goes, I'm playing. I'm not sitting out here, for 6, 8, 12 weeks on a dislocated shoulder, which a lot of people did that. So that's where we developed his shoulder brace, and he played in 2 weeks. And he just continued to get better. The shoulder brace, the subluxing shoulder dislocation, incredible because it was a 3-axle brace. And I used it all through the years. If somebody had a dislocation or subluxation, we just put them in that, and they didn't, they would slide a little bit, but they never did re-dislocated. And then they went on and healed. So a lot of things like that. And then of course, a lot of taping techniques and so forth.
Yeah. I think, your biggest influence on me personally was the whole high ankle sprain. When I've talked to you, I don't know, probably it's probably getting close to 10 years when you came to Ball State that time, and just blew my mind on how to treat a high ankle sprain. I had kind of had it in my mind, but I couldn't put it together. And you came in and said, this is the reason why you need to do X, Y, and Z on a high ankle sprain. It's really a tib fib sprain that you got to stabilize. And it saved a lot. Probably in my 15 years, I've only had one kid that I couldn't get back, and I think it was because mostly he just didn't want to play anymore. But I used that a lot and got guys back a lot quicker. And it's kind of the thing that I always thought about with you is I heard Bill Polian say one time that the only ability that matters is availability. And that's when he would say that, I would think of you, because you were doing that way before he was saying that. So that was the big thing, is that and then I would try to teach that to our students, that you're sitting there, you don't want to fumble around with this high ankle sprain issue and prolong it. When you can try to find ways to safely get them back in and protect them, and that's translated on too. But so you talk to me a little bit about some of the interns you had at New England. I mean, you've obviously had quite a few interns, but a lot of Ball State interns too. With that, I have,
yeah. Whenever I could get Ball State intern, that was a slam dunk.
Yeah.
But just like your experience in Philadelphia, we had, I've had interns from almost every state in the union. I can't remember all the names, or just too many of them, but what I was able to do in New England as the years went on, they had a bunch of curriculum schools here in Boston. So you have Bridgewater State University, you had Boston University had a big time program, University of New Hampshire. There were a lot of schools that had have programs, Ithaca. So make it convenient and add to the staff. See, if I had a with universities with their really really good students, or then we would make an arrangement where they would work training camp, but rather than work their sports during the year, then their director would allow them to do an internship with me. So I had them all year long.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, that was good. Very innovative there. And I always had, 5 or 6 people that when they were done with their classes, then they'd come out in the afternoon and work in my program.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, good. And then they would work game day, and then also they were allowed to travel.
So it was like, that was almost like a clinical rotation with an NFL team without interning, basically.
Yeah,
I mean,
correct. Yeah.
Wow.
Well stated. Yes. So that worked great, and I did that for probably the last 10 years.
Yeah. That would be really cool. I mean, just the fact that you had an opportunity, that obviously selective opportunity, it'd have to be the best,
Yes.
the best again, but
Yeah.
to have that option to go out there and do that and see that and spend time with you and your staff. I mean, that was phenomenal. So, so at the end of your tenure with the Patriots, what were you doing at that point in time then? When that time came about, what was your next steps?
Well, then after that, I was going to work with the Kraft Group to put in a medical facility at Gillette Stadium.
Okay.
And, worked on that for about a year and a half. And then I realized that, and they were building a new stadium, and I realized that this wasn't going to hit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was down the road. And then it down the road, it took about another 10 years for that to happen, because now they have the hospital, the whole complex over there and so forth, and surgery center and et cetera. And they have a shopping mall all around the stadium and all that.
Right.
But so knowing that, I always had a connection with, Andover Coda Products, then became Andover Healthcare, because in 1995, I helped Andover develop PowerFlex.
Yeah.
Okay. There, up to that time, there was no premier cohesive bandage. The only thing we had was just trainer's cloth tape. You had J&J and a couple other companies that they do tape and little elasticon, things like that. So the owner of Andover, always knew him because they had exhibited at the meetings and all that with all these tape products. But he developed this cohesive PowerFlex for sports, and he didn't know where it fit in. So he called and said, "Ron, I want you to take a look at something." So he said, "Where would you use this?" So, I dabble with it and so forth. And I said, "Well, I think this is a great thing to replace underwrap." And then it also has a multi other purposes, for in sports.
Yeah.
And so then I developed with PowerFlex, the PowerFlex taping system. And then after, I stopped working as, athletic trainer, then he said, "Well, won't you take this and go out and teach it?" So from 2003 until 2020.
Yeah, 2020.
Yeah, 2020, I did that. So I traveled. So I'd go to, as I'd go in and usually within an hour and a half, teach as much taping techniques as I can with our taping system. So I've been fortunate to visit just about every university in the country, Division 1, 2, 3, all pro teams, all of Canada. And then also we did teaching in Europe, taught classes there. So again, it was another great career, second career.
Yeah. Yeah. With a tremendous product, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
That's the thing is, it's still, and again, it still blows me away that we have younger people that are taping with pre-wrap and cloth tape, and I still use I use some cloth tape in my heel locks and stuff like that. But I mean, all my foundation of my tape job is all the PowerFlex PowerTape system, and it's funny because like we have new freshmen that come in every year and they get their ankles taped and they're like, this stuff is different. I go, this stuff is better. You're better protected with this stuff. And and after a while, somebody comes in and tapes them with a pre-wrapper and cloth tape, and it's like they're like, this isn't good enough. They don't like it. They want the other stuff, and it is. To me, it's just a superior product, and it's. I mean, I know it's caught on in some places and stuff, but it's funny. We've had some turnover in our staff, and they ask us like, why do we have all this stuff? And I go, because it's better. And number one, one of our greatest alumni happens to represent this company, or in some way, shape, or form represent it. So yeah, we got it. But I've converted some people over with that. I know our volleyball athlete trainer, before Andrea left, I talked to her extensively about why you should use this, and so she's now back in St. Louis and hopefully using it a little bit with that too. So, but yeah, PowerFlex has, and now they've kind of expanded into not only the human healthcare market, but I mean, I was at a farm store the other day and going through the vet aisle, and there's PowerFlex for horses.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We've had that for a long time.
Yeah.
The animal health is another part of. See, we have the medical side, sports med, and
right.
Animal health worldwide. Yeah.
But
yeah, there's nothing that compares, as you know. I mean, you take under wrap, which tears like paper and has zero strength, and it's just a skin protector basically. And whereas PowerFlex has 23 pounds as your first layer base, and then you add on whatever type of tape. There's no comparison. So that was a fun 18 years, and I mean, you can imagine how many. When I've been to almost every university in the United States, all the great people and many, the brotherhood of athletic training is special.
Yeah.
The sincerity and welcoming of having me come in and teach the staff and so forth. It
always has been a lot of fun with that, being able to do that. Well, I'm gonna get ready to kind of start wrapping this up a little bit, because we've had a great conversation and stuff. But one of the questions that or there's actually two different questions I've been asking people, but in your case, I'm going to ask this one. If you were talking to a group of young athletic trainers today, what is that one piece of advice that you would give them as they would be starting their careers?
As I traveled, to all the universities and sports teams, for the 18 years, it's just amazing, to observe and talk to all these people and be part of the whole progression of our, our vocation.
Yeah.
The athletic training society. But what I have always told people is, okay, let's say everybody's smart, right?
Right.
Okay. And I talked to a lot of head athletic trainers, and the thing that I observe is if you have so many people on a staff. Some people have 10, 12, 15 people, 6, 8, 10, what have you, depending on the size of the school and all that. But the thing that I always tell people is to get great at everything. Our profession is prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation. These three umbrellas have so many different segments within. Get as great as you can on everything because the competition is fierce. But the thing I always tell them is get great at everything, but get really good at one thing. Have a niche that separates you from your competition. And then if you have this great niche, somebody out there is going to recognize that, and they want that niche on their staff. I think that's the best piece of advice that I can give, because I had the niche and what that niche did for my career.
Yeah, I was going to say that
versus the competition.
Yeah, you're definitely backing that up with your experience. That advice, because it really did set you on a pathway of some tremendous experiences in this profession, and the amount of people that you've influenced and taught and stuff too. I mean, that's some great advice, I think, in that capacity. Yeah. Well, listen, it's been great. You have anything else you think you might want to? I mean, you don't have a Dickerson Sendre story. I already asked you that one. That's the one thing I ask about too. But because I know that
the only thing I can say is in regard to all four of my mentors and educators, and when you talk about Bud is Bud. He was the father for us all.
Yeah.
And then Dick was a big mentor for me, and then of course Ron and Jim both when I was a student, and so forth. But all four of those people, as you well know, just greatest people on the planet. What they have done for so many of us, and we're all blessed in having them as our mentors and friends, and great friends forever, for a lifetime.
Yeah, that's definitely the one thing that you try to explain to people, especially if they ask about the Ring of Honor. That's the one thing I try to explain to people, like you don't understand, and I can try to explain it to you, but the amount of these were real people that you would talk to and sit down and have a conversation with, that were genuinely concerned with where you were going in your career. And if you had that opportunity to do that, you were a much better person for it. And that's kind of what was the inspiration for what we're doing today, was to be able to sit down and then people hear these stories and understand, but maybe hear a little something that, hey, this can be something that I can do wherever I'm at, and try to develop keep that relationship going. Because to me, athletic training is about that. It's about people and relationships and healthcare that we do along the way. But those relationships are really what connect us to our patient population, our coaches, our parents, or whatever it is that you're doing with that. And that's why I think this is why it's one of the greatest professions out there, is because it seems like healthcare sometimes is a little bit disconnected at times. I mean, it's funny when I talk to kids, I'm like, you went and saw the doctor. Who'd you see? And they go, I don't remember. And I went, well, maybe they're a great physician, but they're not a great connector. And if they're taking care of you, you need to remember names and that type of thing. And because they're taking care of you or taking care of your mom or whatever. And hopefully that somebody said, well, I saw an athlete trainer and their name was so-and-so, Ron O'Neill, Troy Hirschman, whatever. They would make that connect first and then provide healthcare beyond that. So, but I really appreciate you coming on. This was a great talk. And I think a lot of people will have some fun with this, just like they've had fun with the other ones, and we'll go from there. So we're going.
Great idea. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So we're just hang on a minute, and let me make sure this gets started downloading. But so we just want to thank Ron for coming on Off the Roll. Take care. All right.
I want to thank Ron for coming on the podcast today. It was a great podcast, and I enjoyed my time talking to him. Hopefully there's some great tidbits of some knowledge and some mentorship and some advice in this podcast, especially from what he has done from the development of athletic training products. So give us some feedback on our email address, which is offtherollpodcast@gmail.com, or you hit me up on my personal Facebook page. We'd love to hear from you. Everybody have a great day, and go Cardinals tonight.